Hi, welcome. I'm Matt Wyman, CEO and co-founder of Acario. Acario provides agent simulation. We simulate users to break your agents before your customers do. Joining me today is Ryan Strom, CEO and co-founder of Stones AI. Welcome, Ryan.
Hey Matt, thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you here. Before we dive into all the details, because we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about, can you maybe tell us a little bit about Stones AI?
Yeah. So Stones AI is a AI automation company where we're automating compliance for clients and for partners, mostly mid-market enterprise level clients. And when we say by compliance, because I have learned in the year that I've been over a year that I've been doing this, compliance is a very broad term. It means a lot of things. We specifically focus on security and privacy digital compliance. So think of things like SOC 2, GDPR, ISO 27001 for those that are, I'm naming off frameworks that may or may not be relevant to anybody, but if you
A
are
lot of people know
relevant,
what you mean.
yeah, if you know those things, then you know the type of compliance that we do.
It's funny. I think we should actually we should talk about that a bit, terminology and that whole world. But before we dive into that, I'd actually love to start on the human component because what I find often as we start to talk about AI and agents, it does tend to get into the technical, and I think none of this is relevant if there isn't a human problem being solved on the other side. So when you think about this coming world and all these new capabilities that are showing up, what skill, what um, aspect of the human experience do you think people need to focus on to really be ready for and take most advantage of this coming world in front of us?
Yeah, man, excellent question. One that honestly I debate with everybody else in the AI world all the time, and be surprised how different the answers are that you have when you have those conversations. What I would say is, I think first and foremost is having a critical eye, especially nowadays. I think in the future it's going to be even harder, but you can tell when somebody has just put something into ChatGPT or the LLM of choice and they didn't proofread it and just spit it back out to you. And you're like, okay, I mean, 70% of it is relatively good, but there's a lot of weird things in here. So I think that critical eye is really important. And this is the one that I always like to say. In fact, I just told my nephew who is 18, just graduated high school, and he's like, "What do I do? I was going to be a developer, and that feels like a bad idea now." And I told him, I was like, "Well, good, bad. I can't tell you if that's a good career path or not for the future because it's really hard to predict. But one thing that will be true, I feel like AI is not going to replace taste in humans.
Hmm,
And that is
interesting.
really, really important. And that's what gives it the human feel, the personable level. Because I'm sure you've done this as well, Matt. You read through or you see a video or you see an image that was generated by AI, and it might be spectacular, visually just beautiful. Prose are excellently written, but it feels lifeless. You're just like
Yeah.
it doesn't have a feel to it versus one that is arguably not as well written, not as visually stunning, but you make a real connection with it, and it's unexplained. You don't know how to explain that. I don't know how to explain that really well, other than I think that's taste and that's human being involved, right? A human in the loop, if you will.
Yeah. There's a person on the other side.
Right.
You're not talking to a machine. You're using it for a reason. It's fascinating. I've building on that. I've found that there's an interesting interplay. You're talking about that critical eye, so that you're looking at the output, and I think there's an interesting interplay between trust and laziness. So I would not have
Mm.
until recently. I wouldn't have said lazy is the opposite of trust, but what I'm finding is people start to use these tools, and then they reach this interesting level of trust where they stop paying attention to what it's doing, which is
Yeah.
lazy. And like, just read it. You produced whatever you produce, paragraphs, some sentences, maybe something even longer. Like like if you had asked an intern to go do that, you'd read it. You'd make sure. So there's this interesting change, and this is the other side of the human element, right? We change behavior patterns over time. And so I think it's really fascinating, like the critical eye, and then focusing on taste, or this sort of the ineffable experiences. Um, there is an element of that, and it's hard to predict why the different experiences are sort of I want to use the word triggering, but not in a negative sense, are sort of causing us to think this way, and to go from low levels of trust and expecting hallucinations to this sort of lazy experience of like, we'll just use it and send it along. Uh, it's an interesting transition. The other dimension you raised a moment ago was around the words we choose to use, and I'm finding like even just now, trust versus lazy, critical eye, and taste. Like we're having to find all these words to apply to these new experiences. And you're out there, telling the story of Stone's AI, and having to shape the narrative. Um, a lot of these, my customers, if I say the word agent, they'll roll their eyes because there's no such thing, right? They need it to be like super tangible. Uh, but how are you finding you're navigating through the sort of word salad and narrative of GTM?
Yeah, it is very tricky. We have ping ponged between using AI a lot in sales calls or in go to market materials that we put out in the ether, to completely abandoning the word AI and using the word
Hmm.
automation. We have now, kind of like everything does, we're trying to kind of settle back into a happy medium, and so what we try to do, especially from a go to market perspective, is allow our clients or our prospects at that time when we're talking to them to kind of dictate that conversation to us and let us know which way to go. And so, an example of that is, if a compliance manager has been mandated by their board to start using AI, even if the board doesn't know what that means, because we've heard this on sales calls, and the compliance manager might even ask Basco, well, what do you mean go use AI? And they say, I don't know, but we need to use AI because that's where all the value is in society right now. And so those times we'll use the word AI a bit more because that's hitting those buzzwords that compliance manager was basically charged to go find. Then we'll talk, literally have another call the next hour and talk with somebody that is very familiar with AI. Maybe they have an engineering background and have moved into compliance. And so we spend less time talking about AI in just like a big broad term. And we'll either use more specific terms within the AI, or we'll just talk about automation so that we can kind of not have the conversation colored, if you will, around the word AI
Interesting.
and have that be a sticky point. Because the biggest thing we don't want to do is get hung up on the word AI. We want to get into the value that our tool provides. And the quicker we can get into those values around what we provide, and the benefit to the client, the better our chances of closing that deal, generally speaking. The more times we spend just like talking semantics around AI, likely we're not going to close that client because it's just they're not getting any value out of this conversation other than talking about AI generally.
You're not
So
talking at the right level at that point. I'm struck that I don't even think it's a category. There's a set of we'll focus on AI natives for a moment. There's a set of AI natives that are focusing on the use of LLMs as their go-to-market principle. Everything about who they are is the fact that they use an LLM. But there's actually another whole collection of folks who, in many respects, I'll even say avoid mention of models and LLMs and whatnot. They're talking about the value prop, and it so happens that they use models to achieve that value prop. Um, and I think it's an interesting choice as to, well, which market am I in? Is my buyer or even my gatekeeper in an environment where there's been an AI mandate, or are they in an environment that is maybe more bottom line oriented, where they're being told, you need to go figure out how to reduce costs, or you need to figure out how to become more efficient. And we believe that because there's all these AI capabilities out there. Like, so that there's an interesting, both are ending up talking to quote unquote AI native companies, but then the go to market looks wildly different for the two. Do you think compliance kind of sits? I mean, it's hard to make generalizations, but do you find that compliance kind of sits in one or the other camp more, and that's why you're seeing this sort of lean, and you're having to
Mm,
play this game between them?
that's a fantastic question, Matt. Man, what I would say is traditionally compliance is a little bit more lagging as far as an adoption to new technologies. Um, so I would say it generally tends more towards the bottom line and the value prop side. But in the last few months, especially, we've seen these AI mandates, which you said that so brilliantly. I'm jealous sometimes the way you just like phrase things. You phrase it so beautifully, Matt. But that AI mandate has become more and more of a talking point that has come up and a lot more. So it's the frequency of that, I guess I should say, is becoming more all the time, more recent, right? And um, and I think the other thing is too is when we talk to a compliance manager, I don't know that that actual compliance manager cares that much about, is it AI, is it traditional automation, is it not at all? But they need to report back to their board or whomever to get approval for this. And if we're not kind of giving them the right talking points that's going to resonate with their board or their executive team that's making the decision, then we don't have a chance, because generally that compliance manager is a gatekeeper. And I think you're hitting a really important point about the gatekeeper versus the decision maker or the actual buyer, right? And so that the buyer, the decision maker, who is one or two or more levels removed from the day-to-day work of a compliance manager, they're just flooded with buzzwords of AI and how much all these things are going on. The compliance manager that's doing their day-to-day job, I don't think that they care. They just want to do their job a little bit better, with a little bit less headache, and a little bit less time and rigor going into it, right? And maybe spend more time focusing on the things that they like to focus on, instead of, which is a thing we hear all the time, is building the same report every week on and week out for the same audience, and they get tired of doing that, right? And so that's where us using automation resonates with them. Yeah, we'll automate that report for you. You give us the report, we'll automate it, and every week we'll have it sent to your email at whatever time you need, right? Those things will resonate with the compliance manager, but they need to be empowered with, it's AI agents and it's AI powered so that they can go talk to their executives and get approval for the budget.
Yeah, that resonates really strongly with me. It does feel like when you really get to the human problem, I don't care how it's solved. I don't care how it's solved. I mean, I'm a technologist. I love technology. I'm always playing with technology. But at the end of the day, if I have a problem, so these are two different worlds. So sure, I like to play with technology, but when I have a problem, I just want it solved. Just
Yes,
solve the problem.
totally.
So, and I think that's what I guess my mental model of compliance is a very fact-based group.
Yes,
They're going to think very specifically about this is the outcome, this is what I need, get there.
they are.
So that resonates a lot with me that you would see that. Um, but it also is interesting because I think there's a hint of this in your conversation where you're describing it. You even said an hour later you had a different conversation. You have some sort of learning mental model going, that's sitting in here. So you're thinking about how you're going about this. Can you maybe elaborate on that? Because I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. So I would say it starts with a kind of a general pillar, or I use the word mantra, and everybody in my company tells me not to use the word mantra, but I love the word
I
mantra.
love the word mantra. Why not?
I'm going to continue to use it. But we have a saying that and this is how I start every ELT meeting. So we have
Hmm.
an executive leadership meeting every Friday. We go around the table with all the leaders and say, "What have you learned this week?" Not what have you got done? What are you working on? I don't care about those. Everybody that we employ is really strong at what they do. They work all the time. I don't need a check of, are you doing enough work? It's no, what are you learning? And then how are you applying that learning next week to things that we're doing? And so what I'll say, and this is where some of the really great things with especially like large language models have really helped us and allowed us to
Hmm.
speed up those learnings, is we were going from learning, on monthly, maybe sometimes weekly basis, as much as we can kind of analyze those things. And now, because we've used injected large language models and AI agents into different parts of our process, not the human to human, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, those human to human connections, but a lot of the analysis behind the scenes. So what I mean by that is we have an agent that will give us a summary of a meeting, couple minutes after. A lot of folks use those. There's a lot of tools out there that do that, but we've specifically given the guidance to our agents to talk about learnings and how do we apply those to the next call, because our agents understand the next schedule or understand our schedules. And so we'll take those learnings and we can have a 5 minute debrief with my business partner, who is our chief revenue officer. And we can have a 5 minute debrief about, like, hey, he said, XYZ quite a bit. He talked about, reports needing to be automated and this and the other. But then he mentioned, and will be one of the notes, the board has an AI mandate. And we go, oh, okay, cool. So that means we need to empower them with AI. So when we said, hey, we're going to give you some materials to take back to your executive team, we're going to make sure we put AI in those. So that'll be it on the fly. We'll change those one pagers or whatever it might be, a deck. We might change those on the fly to give to them to empower them to present back to their executives. So we're able to apply those learnings very rapidly, which we were not able to do, a year ago, and definitely have not been able to do up until, the large language models kind of came into play a couple of years ago. So that's where I think AI has helped us in that learning curve. But I'll say that we make a really big point not to lean on that too much. And
Oh, really?
I always ask especially my experts in their field. So if it's a technical, I'll talk to the technical team. If it's on the sales side, I'm talking with chief revenue officer of the sales team. And I always want for them to tell me, like, what is your qualitative feels that you got from it, because that's as important as what the AI is analyzing and giving us, you know kind of fuzzy quantitative. That's how I call it fuzzy quantitative, because it's not really quantitative necessarily, but it is a little bit. But, like, those qualitative and feel based things, those are still really important, and we really lean on those very heavily. In fact, I got off a call earlier today as just a very poignant example where I thought the call did not go well, like, and we looked at the notes, and the notes are like, oh, I don't know that it went super well. And my CRO goes, no, man, that was amazing. He mentioned 3 different clients that he has that he potentially wants to introduce us to. And I was like, oh, I mean, I heard that, but I didn't, the way he said it in the kind of context, it didn't resonate and sink in. And my CRO had that insight. And so then now we've already doubled down on that guy. We've already sent him some of our materials, and he's excited, and, like, I would have been like, I probably shouldn't spend too much more time on this partner because I don't know if it's going anywhere. A CRO recognized immediately, because he's been in the field for 20 years doing sales, and understood, like, no, he hit the keywords that are really important that you want to hear in a sales side. Hey, this client and this person, have you talked to Maggie? Like mentioning names and those kind of things.
And style is such a big difference too, right?
Yes.
When we're having conversations, if the other side doesn't sort of match style, then you can miss things just because you're not maybe accustomed to hearing. It is interesting. Like I do, I'm sure you have as well. In fact, I'm sure everyone who's listening to this has listened to and held a lot of customer discovery conversations. And of course, I'm pulling all the transcripts, and of course, I'm looking at summaries and whatnot. I mean, we're an evaluation product, so I then use all those capabilities to go look at, like, well, how did it work out? What were the good and bads and all this other good stuff? My co-founder pointed out after we were reviewing sort of a body of discovery calls that we should go look at not so much the quality of responses, but the sentiment of the of the answer. So there's kind of a nuance here, but because we had that data, we had the audio, we had the video, we had all this, we had all the data. So I went through and started looking at not whether or not I answered the question well, because I'm I'm the expert. So if I don't answer it well, that's my problem. That's my choice. Um, the it was how well did the person receive the answer, that I
Yes.
gave. And that became really eye opening for the exact same reason you just said, which was you don't always, as the speaker, you don't always recognize how it's being interpreted on the other side. You can think it went really well, but actually you were incredibly off putting because for whatever reason. Uh, Vice versa, is a person can give you verbal positive feedback, but actually give you intonation and body language saying that they actually don't agree. They're just being nice.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
so it like up leveled all of our learnings just by completing that loop. But I love that but it's this combination that you're referring to. It's the don't become dependent on one side versus the other. It's a supplement, not a replacement.
Yes.
And quite often that words, those words are not seen positively, but I think in this moment in time, it is all about supplementing and holding on to intuition and not being, not losing that that awe of what can be done, but also not becoming dependent on it as the only way. Have you gone further? Have you taken those learning cycles and then started to make strategic decisions that you're acting on, like that are sort of informed differently because you're using AI to do analysis or AI to do projections, or are you sort of changing the shape of the business faster as a side effect of this? I understand the conversation piece makes 1,000% sense, but with your product background, are you also finding that you're kind of shifting the shape of what you're doing at Stones a little bit more quickly?
Absolutely. So, and maybe this is a good time. I'll give a little bit of background to kind of like how we got to where we are now. And
Hmm.
AI has been a big shape of like where we getting to where we are now. So when we started a year ago, we started as a professional services company. So we were just offering compliance
Oh,
services.
wow.
So we could, and my thought was like, well, it's sort of paid market research. We want to talk to these folks anyway. Why not go out and actually try to do the job and see how good we do at it? The first few, not very good. Let's be 100% honest. We weren't amazing. But we learned a ton with that. And then when we got out of that phase, which was earlier this year, we kind of shut down professional services in Q1 and finished up our last client, I think in April, maybe the beginning of May. And at that point, we kind of turned all of our focus into being a product company and started to build out our product. And when we started in that place, we actually were going to be an AI governance platform because we
Uh-huh.
thought that was the place to go because all of our clients we had taken were just really interested in AI compliance. And so we started going, well, that feels like maybe the place we need to go is into AI compliance or AI governance. And we started down that road and we, we used vibe coding tools to quickly build prototypes and then take them back out to people we had talked to and go, hey, is this what you mean? And the more we talked about it, we started to uncover that they were talking about AI compliance and those kind of things, but they had bigger need. Like they had these huge needs around just quote unquote traditional digital compliance, right? And so these were maybe things that they were thinking about, and they were they're reading in news articles or in posts and on LinkedIn about AI and how you govern AI and these kind of things, but their actual problems where they're spending money are still on traditional compliance. They're still needing to
Yeah.
spend money on SOC 2 and still need to spend it on CMMC and those kind of different frameworks. And so we started pulling back that onion and having those conversations, because, we would show them a prototype, for an example, right? Build something lovable. And they'd be like, this is really cool. And we're like, oh, how much would you spend on it? And they're like, oh, no, I don't want to buy this. It's cool, but no,
Classic.
I don't want to spend any money on this. And then it's like, well, what would you spend money on? And they're like, well, I mean, honestly, we're in the middle of a SOC 2 audit and I'm getting destroyed. So I would love something that would help me out with that. And then you start uncovering that, and then we would go build. Then we went and we were going, okay, well, let's just build like a policy generator. So let's just generate policies for folks based on context that we get. We'll build a cool RAG system, and then it'll help inform the policies, and you'll have really great custom policies. And you go into them and you talk to them, you present something, and you start unraveling the rabbit hole. And they're like, I mean, yeah, this is cool. It's a small part of overall compliance that we're doing, right? And it was just like the more we talk, the more we unravel, we started getting into this place. And so, fast forward to, I think, June, July of this year, we kind of got like, okay, we know we're building digital compliance. We thought we were building for small to medium sized businesses. That's where we thought we were going to be our expertise. We start going in and realizing these guys they're not spending money on compliance. It makes sense. If you're small, like that's not the first, forethought in your head. And then we started to onboard our compliance board, and our compliance board. We started having conversations with them. Started doing some AI analysis. We realized we needed to be enterprise grade. So now we're building an enterprise grade software, which is going to be released here very shortly. And that's kind of where we've gone to. So we started at professional services, thought we were going to be AI governance, thought we were going to be small to medium sized businesses, and now we're selling into enterprise and government, which is really fascinating, kind of that whole life cycle. And you think about all of that, and I didn't hit on all of the AI parts, but you think about all of that. That's a year, little over 14 months worth of like research, 15 months maybe worth of research. Could you have compacted that amount of research in 15 months, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago? It'd been really hard. You could have done it maybe if you had a really good team, but doing that with like one, two people, one of those is non-technical, it's only sales. So I was doing all the technical, and I am not a technical person. You don't want me touching code? That's a bad idea for everybody. Um, so, those abilities to be able to rapidly prototype with tools like Lovable or Replit or Data Button, being able to like really rapidly prototype and get to the root cause. Because the point that I'm getting to is like 2, 3 years ago, I could have taken a deck to somebody and they might have gone, yeah, this is cool, given us very high level feedback. We wouldn't have known to pivot off of AI governance. We wouldn't have known to pivot off of small to medium sized businesses. Or it would have taken us however many more months to learn that, because we would have had to have that many more conversations, because we weren't able to show them something that they were like, well, this is cool, but I'm not going to pay for that. Right. And then
Yeah,
you get those immediate things and you're like, oh shit, okay, we need to rethink what we're doing. And then also just the fact that I can build those prototypes with super low burn rates, super low budget, right? Be able to iterate at such a low cost, where that before would have been very expensive to do that kind of iterative prototyping.
it would have been, but it's interesting because you're also touching on a product um, methodology, I guess I might call it,
Mm,
where that leans heavily on user experience research. So the alternative would have been to use designers and researchers to go through and try to learn as much as you can about day in the life, and to have done designs and put those in front of people. But the imagination gap always becomes a problem, because you either become so effectively designed that it feels too real, then people don't give you that honest answer because they just feel like it's real, and then they back off. No one really wants to say, that it's ugly.
right.
They don't want to give you that negative feedback, and that's just a human behavior. Or
Hmm.
you're on the other side, and it takes a experienced person to look at wireframes and to look at sketches and actually see the product that's underneath them. There's a big leap between the two, and it has often been my observation that it's very difficult as a product person trying to experiment with different ways to present a product. It can be very difficult to find that line between the two. Um, and so there's also a certain amount of we'll call it fidelity problem in terms of the feedback that you get. Like, okay, I've shown this, but can I really trust all the data I've got back? How precise is it? So the lovables, the prototype, the rapid prototyping makes it just real enough, but you can kind of still tell that's not really a full
Yeah,
thing yet. You can see the
totally.
edges of it, but you can interact enough that you can get some feedback. I wonder how much people are going to get accustomed to
Hmm.
seeing those, and how much of that we can start to um I'm again going way off the deep end here, but like how much of that we can maybe even send it out, like, hey, here's here's a prototype, give me some feedback on this, and then turn it into an asynchronous process maybe on the other side. Because many of these cases, I don't there's always that experiment of I'll build features into the product and build them lightly to see
Hmm.
how people react to them before I build them entirely or completely. But it would be amazing to be able to get that sort of discussion back and forth, like, hey, what do you think of this? feel free to edit it, and maybe they can somehow, you know,
Mm,
put in comments and it changes itself in
yeah,
some way or whatever. Then what you get back is like, wow, I sent them A and it turned into Q. That's interesting. Why did it turn into Q? What were you solving? Like, I wonder if there's a whole new world building on what you were doing, where we can learn even more from folks on the
that's
other side.
fascinating. Matt, I'm not gonna lie. That would be a really cool product, is if you could send a prototype to a client and but they could modify it, in a protected environment. That's
But
super fascinating.
isn't that where they're going? Like, I think
I
that's where
think
these
so.
tools are headed already. I'm just trying to figure out on the other side, like, how do we build a company? How do we build these capabilities learning in that world? And I love the fact that you actually were using those deliberately to go get that feedback, to ask those questions and using those to drive that conversation, as opposed to leaping to the product, leaping to design, or going to the cold survey of like, hey, we're just gonna have a conversation and see what you say. I'll actually show it to you, make it tangible just enough.
Yeah, and on that, we started with like what tools or skills do folks need to have, and I'm just thinking about this. I mean, this is kind of coming off the cuff organically from this conversation. So, folks, take it or leave it. I don't know if this is a good idea. You can
Always
ask
the
my
best
team.
ones.
I have lots of I tell my team this all the time, just real quickly. I have 100 ideas a day. 99.99 of them are really bad, and you should tell me no way we're doing that. But every once in a while, there's a gold one in there, and we should absolutely do it. So anyway, take it with a grain of salt. But what we did is we found to disarm folks, because you talked about like that, fidelity of the prototype, and some people don't want to give you like honest feedback. So what we started doing, because I was kind of picking up on that, it's hard to tell whether people are giving you like a real answer, right? And so what we started doing is we actually were really transparent about the fact that we built this prototype with Lovable. So I would actually have the call and I'd be like, hey guys, beat this up. I built this yesterday in Lovable. And when I give them this, like, oh, he built it yesterday, like side to desk, like, oh, I could destroy this thing, not a big deal. And you started getting really good feedback, because it was just like, hey guys, like, it's all good. You tear it down, I'll build another one tomorrow. It's all good. I don't care. And that kind of disarmed everybody to be like, oh, I can give like real feedback. Everybody's eyes would light up and be like, oh, well, this like sucks. And if you did this, and I'm like, great, give it everything you got. This is cool. Because we don't really, it's another one of our mantras. I'm going to use the word, and my team's going to see this and be like, God, dude, you used it twice. Is we
It's a
have
successful.
it's like we have no sacred cows. And so what I mean by that is like you have to be willing to walk away from anything, and your ideas are not yours. I have this like feeling, and we don't need to get into it. This would go like a whole nother rabbit hole of a podcast, but like I think ideas are independent of us. I don't think humans own those. I think that ideas come and go. And so if you get tied too much to one idea, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. Versus like, hey, an idea just comes in and maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's a bad idea, run with it for a little bit, test it out. If it's great, cool, run with it. If not, drop it, go to the next one. It's all good.
I love this. You know what? In fact, I love it so much. You just identified like the third. We talked about different human skills that people need, and I think you just identified like a whole nother one. And I want to end on that note, which is flexibility. You just identified that like if we're gonna really take advantage of this, we've got to think in terms of flexibility. Like we've
Yeah.
got to be able to put these down in different ways and try it in different ways and give responses. And we have to be flexible to make those little tweaks to how we do things,
Hmm.
but not lose sight of the objective. So I love that. It fits perfectly with your earlier comment as well. Like that, you got to have that critical thinking. You got to have that critical eye, but you also have to have the flexibility to apply it. So Ryan, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much.
No, this was great, Matt. Thank you. Yeah, this was so much fun. And again, I wish I could articulate as well as you
Wow,
do.
you were great. It was
But
awesome.
this was fun. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Definitely.